But I think it is important to understand the background, as I said, that when we became sort of independent, which we doubt that we ever became independent, because we've continued to live under an oppressive regime. In 1978, His Majesty King Sobhuza introduced a system of government, which he called the Tingundla system of government. Tingundla is actually plural of Ingundla. Ingundla in democracies simply means a constituency where people would gather, to discuss issues affecting them in governance. So he introduced a system like that, based on various places in the country where people would have the capacity to meet and discuss issues. Over the years, those areas across the country, we've got now 55 of these constituencies, and people use those areas to elect members of parliament. All right. In a multi-party system, you would have members of political parties contesting at that level to win a seat in parliament. So our system is such that whilst people can elect these members of parliament, you don't elect them because they belong to a political party. You elect somebody because the society where the person lives is viewed to be a man or woman of good standing. And how you define good standing is open.
But you do vote on that person?
You do vote for that person.
And does anyone else oppose that person?
The system is such that you must have at least 15, somebody is going to nominate you. You must be supported by at least 15 people to qualify to stand for elections. The emphasis is that you must not belong to a political party. You must just be one Thulani Maseko coming from somewhere. And I think the reason for that is important because it is meant to manipulate the system. You don't owe, allegiance to the voters per se. You owe allegiance to the king. So parliament, even though it is elected from these various constituencies, it is not an independent institution. But let me explain how the whole thing works. You've got 55 areas where people elect members of parliament directly into parliament. We've got a two-chamber parliament, Senate and the House of Assembly. So the 55 goes into the lower house. And then the king will appoint 10 other people, So you've got at least 65 members of the lower house. And then you've got the upper house, which is composed of 30. The king appoints 20 of the 30, And then the 10 other members are nominated by the lower house from amongst members of the public, They would like, we like Thulani Maseko, we think he can be a member of the House of Senate, and they do so. Now, obviously, you can't have an autonomous parliament, because it's manipulated by the regime. A clear example of that was that in 2003, after the whole process of election was done, Parliament elected the speaker. They can elect a speaker from amongst themselves in terms of the law. So they elected one guy whose father was a member of the King's Party, in the olden days, called the Imbo National Movement. It is alleged that because my king has got, at least for now, we can say he's got 14 wives, It is said that this speaker had some kind of an affair with one of the king's wives at some point in time, and the king didn't like the idea of him being elected as a Speaker of the House. He therefore said, I'm not going to officially declare Parliament open when the time was due until Parliament removed this man from the Speaker. You see, because he appoints 30 members into the House, he appoints the other 10. And if they didn't, comply with that, he would have dissolved Parliament, and people would have lost, their jobs in Parliament, as it were. This man had to be removed. This is the weakness of this Tingundla system of government, which is based on individual merit. The people have got no say as to what goes on exactly in Parliament. That is why people say, look, let us do away with the whole thing and move on towards a system of multi-party democracy.
I think an important point, there are two important points to add, is that when you say individual merit, it's not, I mean, it's not just Thulani Maseko who can do a good job, but that there's a certain system of patronage as well that allows people to get to the point of being elected. And then also in reference to when you talked about individual merit with reference to the process of consultation for the Constitution, was that civil society, and correct me if I'm wrong, but civil society is recognized as people who can organize around issues of labor or
the church.
Yeah, or the church or whatever. We're not brought to the table in ways that people had organized themselves. So it was, you could come and you could speak as yourself, as somebody who had something to say about the Constitution. But as far as bringing civil society to the table in a way that they spoke as a communal or stronger voice, was what wasn't part of the process.
Why did the United Nations support it, the Constitution?
That's a very good question to answer. Actually, that is why we feel that there we see a betrayal of the value of the very principles of the United Nations. Because the process of writing a constitution ought to be an inclusive process. And I think the Universal Declaration speaks very well to that the basis of authority for any government is the will of the people. But I think somehow we have a feeling that Swaziland has been able to evade, world attention. I think because the king and the regime has been able to say, look, we are a unique, type of people, because of the emphasis of the respect for culture and tradition. And I think when that happens, many people are tempted to believe that the people of Swaziland are happy with this thing as it is, which is not true. Because there's no doubt that it is a system that is maintained through the use of force, and fear. I mean, the king commands the armed forces, he commands the police and the security organs of the state. He also, commands influence in the countryside, through the powers of the chiefs. The king is basically the paramount chief who is supported by chiefs who are on the ground in all the areas. And these constituencies, these tingundas, are actually created, in the areas where the chief is a shop steward for the king. He ensures that the cultural values and cultural beliefs are enforced, through the chiefs, and therefore there's no space for dissent. And I think then the United Nations, was made to believe that it is the people of Swaziland who want the system to exist. I think fundamentally because it has a long history, which I didn't go to. If I can go into that, we can spend the whole night sitting there. In 1996, the king appointed the commission, which went around the country to say people must submit on how they want the country to be governed. But when it did that, he said, like he said, you submit there as an individual, as a citizen, not because you've got other people who believe in the same ideas as you have. And it was that commission that said, without any evidence or empirical data, it said that the people of Swaziland have overwhelmingly, that's not my words, that's their word, recommended that the king must continue to have the powers he has had since 1973, meaning that the king must continue to be the supreme ruler and the dictator of the country. They said that the people have said that human rights and fundamental freedoms, must be subjected to the people's traditions, meaning that culture and tradition and custom must take precedence over fundamental human rights. they said that it is the people of Swaziland who have recommended that political parties must continue to be banned in Swaziland, you know. And they've said that, they were speaking for us, the king must continue to appoint the prime minister, and together they must appoint the cabinet. And I think the world was meant to believe that this is what people have said, because this commission was said to have gone all over the country. But we know that that was not the position. People had said that the prime minister must be elected. People had said that we need to have political parties. People had said that we need to enjoy fundamental rights and freedoms. But the whole thing was just manipulated. Surprisingly, when that was happening, Commonwealth, as I've said, Commonwealth was coming in and out to assist in the actual writing of the Constitution. And they met with the groups who were opposed to the process. And you know, I was in one of those meetings when a professor coming from the Commonwealth Secretariat, I don't know whether you heard about Professor Defui, and the professor from Ghana said to us, no, let's give this thing a chance, let's see how far we can go. We said it has never happened that a process which is not informed by the people will give a result to a product that will entrench what people want. You cannot have a good product out of a bad process, and therefore we don't accept this process. But our pleas and our request fell on deaf ears. Just to wind up on that issue, in 2008, Swaziland went through an election. Commonwealth sent an observer mission to Swaziland. It is amazing that the report that the Commonwealth then produced was to the effect that Swaziland must yet again engage in a review of the entire constitution. They said because the powers of the king are so wide that it undermines the concept of the rule of law and separation of powers. But these are the people who funded the process. So I don't know whether it's going to happen that Commonwealth can put more pressure on the king, to open up space for political dissent. Paul, I see you have a question.
Oh, I was just agreeing with what you were saying.
Yes. What immediate sort of pressures and influences would you like to see the state of South Africa, for example, place on the regime in Swaziland? Because they are landlocked by South Africa, which is phenomenally wealthy country for the continent of South Africa. So, what kind of work can be done there in the immediate future?
It's difficult to say. I think the ANC, as the liberation movement of South Africa, we are told that has had some history with His Majesty King Sobhuza II. People tell us that he was a member of the African National Congress. We are told that he was in the same league as Nelson Mandela and Oliver Tambo, and which were the vanguard of the African National Congress. So you can see some historical connections between the ANC and the Swazi regime. We are told that one of the kings, one of the sons of King Sobhuza II, or the other way around, is married to one of the daughters of Nelson Mandela, something like that. That to me indicates some kind of direct links between the ANC and the Swazi monarch. But history tells us also that in the olden days when there were wars in Africa, the Swazi monarch has had a very bad history with the Zulus in the south. And the Swazi monarch, to defend itself, engaged in a process of saying, look, let the Zulu royal family, which was stronger than the Swazi royal family, be forced to marry a Swazi prince, Swazi princess, and therefore to manipulate the whole arrangement. And the current Zulu king, which is in the border with Swaziland in the south, is married to a Swazi princess as well. So, but those are just side issues, you know. There is also history that says that one of the leading political structures in Swaziland now, a group called the People's United Democratic Movement, was also involved with the ANC during the struggle days, you know. When the ANC had base in Southern Africa, there were comrades of the ANC who were involved within Swaziland, and they were collaborating with this organization in the 1980s, you know. We do see some signals of involvement of the ANC as a political party linking up with this banned political party in Swaziland, you know. We therefore believe that despite the connection of the royal family and the ANC in the past, you know, the ANC has not betrayed its principles of defending democracy, human rights, and good governance. But as a party, we understand that they cannot come out and condemn what the king is doing. I mean, those are issues of diplomacy. But we are happy that the ANC, in alliance with the labor unions, the Congress of South African Trade Unions, COSATU, and the South African Communist Party, and the ANC Youth League, you know, have been involved with the Swazi struggle for a long time now. And we do believe that the labor movement in South Africa and the Communist Party would not do anything inside Swaziland which the ANC is not aware of, you know. It is a fact that COSATU and the alliance partners have come out openly to say that democracy must be allowed to prevail in Swaziland. COSATU, I've said, is the Congress of South African Trade Unions. Okay. We understand that we look at developments. We understand that at least 3,000 members of the labor movement in South Africa would have gone to the borders in Swaziland, you know, to support the protest. So there are some signs that the South African counterparts are supporting the move for democracy in Swaziland. Evidence to that also is that because the media in Swaziland is not reporting anything about this movement for change. So there's heavy reliance on South African media. They go into Swaziland to report about what is happening, and people in Swaziland are interviewed on South African radio, TV, and South African newspapers to speak to the world about what's happening there. We can therefore say that whilst we don't hear anything formal from the ANC as a government, you know, we do believe that there are matters of quiet diplomacy, you know, engaging, you know, the regime to transform. And I think just to close on that note, we know that the president, Jacob Zuma, recently made a statement, which though not directly, said that if apartheid could not stop, you know, people from turning against it, he does not believe that anybody in the world can stop people from demanding democracy. And that, in my view, was a message to the king that you need to engage to the people and accept, you know, some form of dialogue with the opposition. I think that's what we seem to see as signs of pressure from South Africa at the moment. I can't speak about Mozambique. I've not heard anything from that side. We have had some support from Botswana, you know, through civil society and the labor movement in Botswana. We have had some message of support from some groups in Zimbabwe. So we can say that there are people who appear to be supporting the struggle for change in Swaziland within the region. But we can't say much about SADC as an institution. The Southern African Development Community, which is just a collection of head of state, we have not had anything from them. We've not had anything from the African Union as a structure, you know, because they all want to be like the king, I believe. They want to command massive support. But we are happy to hear voices on the ground to support the movement for change inside Swaziland.